This is gonna be very interesting, bro. Comparison of the most painful punishments.
Do not read it!
What do y'all think is gonna be the most painful punishment? Okay, somebody puts a rat on your chest and then puts a bowl on top and then lights the bowl up. And it gets hotter and hotter and the rat literally has to dig through your body in order to get out. Brazen bull is also scary as fuck. Burning alive, yeah. That's basically the brazen bull, you're getting cooked.
So the Inquisition is after you now. They've used a leather strap to secure a device that looks like a two-way fork with two sharp points on your neck. One of its sides is pushing against your sternum and the other against your chin. At first, you tried to keep your head up to lessen the pain, but you couldn't stay like this for long. The so-called heretic's fork wasn't deadly, but made the victim suffer from the tiniest move. However, on the scale, wasn't dead.
Why are you doing this? Like, in the 21st century? But why is there a fucking video of this shit? Hello? What type of B-roll footage is this?
The moon haunts you!
Who decided to do this?
Assemble!
This girl literally got the fucking #1 fucking painful punishment in the fucking video. What the fuck you mean?
But made the victim suffer from the tiniest move. However, on the scale of pain based on scientific research, this kind of suffering gets only 27 points out of 140.
What?
In this video, you'll find out about the worst kind of torture
Brazen bull, what is this, waterboarding or drowning?
in the history of humankind. So,
oh my god, the slow dripping water on your fucking head. Have you ever heard about that? Apparently it literally just makes you go fucking insane, bro. What about still water drinking plus Bulgarian tap toe dancing?
Do not read it!
in your life, been subjected to one of the less obvious kinds of torture. It's just that the executioner wasn't persistent enough when tickling you. In ancient China, this was the primary method of punishing delinquents from noble families, since tickles didn't leave any traces of torture on the body, and the victim was able to recover quite fast if the procedure didn't go too far, of course. In European countries, goats were employed as a torture device. The culprit was tied up, and salty water was poured on their feet to make the animal lick them. What's so bad about that, you might ask? It's just that there's an incredible number of nerve endings in the feet, and the goat's rough tongue would irritate them quite a lot.
My god! Why is Ronaldo licking our feet? That's an excellent question, bro. Why is LeBron and Ronaldo fucking licking feet?
So, after a few hours, the tickling
this is a cursed picture,
starts
brother.
inducing not just laughter, but also painful muscle contractions. You lose virtually all control over your body, which causes extreme stress, anxiety, and exhaustion. Moreover, the nerve endings responsible for reacting to tickles also signalize pain. It's just that if we're being tickled for fun, and for a short time, our reaction to stress doesn't go beyond laughter and light sensations in the body. However, if done for hours, this causes the nervous system such overload that the lightest touch causes unbearable physical pain. Now imagine that it's not your feet being tickled, it's your private parts. In India, interrogation of criminals was accompanied by placing a small bug on the culprit's genitals and covering the insect with a walnut shell so that it didn't escape. The constant irritation of super-sensitive areas caused by the bug's movements made the torture unbearable very quickly, and the executioners got any confession they wanted. Eventually, tickle torture would result in death by asphyxiation if the victim developed a throat spasm caused by uncontrollable laughter. Other possible outcomes were cardiac arrest or a brain aneurysm provoked by serious stress. Yet,
where's degloving at? Where's that at?
On the pain scale, tickle torture got only 32 points since the suffering it brought was mostly psychological. This is very similar to the next kind of torture,
India has bugs.
The Chinese water torture.
Boom!
At first, the person was immobilized, and then cold water would slowly drip onto their face or head. Gradually, the constant skin irritation caused by the drops and splashes would make the nervous system hypersensitive, the inability to move, and the wait for the next drop.
Oh my god, this is genuine torture, brother. Genuine torture.
Would literally start driving the person insane. Maybe you've even seen this torture in movies. Here's the paradox though. There's no proof that it was ever used in China. This kind of torture was first described by an Italian lawyer on the cusp of the 16th century. In the mid-18th century, German and French doctors attempted to use this method to cure mental disorders. Moreover, the very term Chinese water torture came into active use owing to a trick by the legendary Harry Houdini. So, does the water drop torture
I wonder who in the world invents this shit, bro. Yo, it was definitely Albert Einstein, bro. It was Albert Einstein's fault. I'm already knowing.
The moon haunts you!
Don't even worry. I'm on the fucking case right now.
Armed
I'm on the
and
case.
dangerous!
I know Einstein did that shit, bro. Back when we were boys, bro, he was always fucking playing pranks on me. It's Isaac Newton. You right. The guy that invented gravity.
actually work? Since it can look harmless at
You're
first
right.
glance, a few bloggers have dared to try it out themselves. The water drop torture was also tested by the Mythbusters. All participants knew they were actually perfectly safe and could be freed at any moment.
What the
Yet
fuck's he look
everyone
like
went
that?
through a hellish experience. At first, the experimenters suffered from cold, thirst, psychological tension, and physical discomfort. Then, their entire bodies started aching, and breathing problems arose.
Why are you doing this? Would you ever fucking volunteer to be tortured? What the fuck is going on? Imagine getting Chinese water tortured because you had ADHD. Is that how people cured ADHD back in the day?
It all ended in a panic
that.
and desperate pleas to be released.
That is the worst.
In addition, after this episode, the Mythbusters received an anonymous letter whose authors reportedly found out that the Chinese water torture may cause mental issues that persist for 20 hours. So, on the pain scale, the water drop torture received 40 points, and
Of course that gives you mental
the
issues.
huge question as to whether it was actually used in practice, at least because it was replaced by much crueler kinds of water torture. One of them was the Swedish drink. This name was invented by the Germans. During the 30 Years' War, they became victims of the Swedish army servicemen, mercenaries, or marauders. This method of torture went as follows. Through a funnel, the perpetrators would pour buckets of the most disgusting liquids imaginable into the victim's throat. They used everything from urine and filth to manure and feces. This was the Swedes' way of torturing the civilians, to force them to give up their money or food. Not only
My
did the
God.
victims feel disgust and humiliation from being subjected to the Swedish drink, they also contracted deadly diseases.
Yeah, no kidding, bro. Imagine being force-fed fucking diarrhea fucking bullshit.
Furthermore, their stomachs stretched, causing horrific pain. The perpetrators would often use wooden planks to put pressure on the victim's bloated
Wasn't-
belly.
Yeah, it wasn't even prisoners of war. It was citizens of the country that the military is serving just because they're not giving up money or food. Bro, you can have my money. Don't have my food, bro. Don't steal my food. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Or hit it with sticks to deepen the suffering. So, on the pain
Ouch,
scale,
bro.
the Swedish drink got 46 points out of the possible 140. Very often,
Would you
one
rather
kind of
eat shit or
torture
drink your own
ranged from
piss?
public humiliation, accompanied by intense
I'd
discomfort,
rather drink my own piss, bro. If you eat shit, you're literally 1000% getting a disease, bro.
to a death punishment with unbearable suffering.
Don't give the IRS
One of
this
such hellish
idea.
inventions was the cane. It's a large board consisting of two halves with a hole between them, used to keep the device on a person's neck. The cane wasn't secured in any way, so the culprit had to support the board with their hands and balance it while walking. To intensify
What?
the punishment, the person in a cane could also be chained, stopping them from ever sitting down. Moreover, the cane's parameters would change according to the severity of the punishment. It could weigh anywhere from 9 to 15 kilograms and have a square, rectangular, or disproportionate, irregular shape. Sometimes they were even double or triple. Often a cane would be so large that the victim would be unable to touch their face to eat or drink. If they weren't helped by those who cared, the victim would die a slow death of hunger and thirst. Yet the cane was also used as an execution device. The convict was placed inside a tall cage made specifically for this purpose.
These guys are literally just like waiting to die. This looks painful. Of course it looks painful. Just imagine like your arms up like this 24/7. Your arms would fucking give out.
A cane would be secured above. Then, a prop would be taken from under the victim's feet, and they would slowly
Oh,
be strangled
hell
with the
no.
board on their neck. That's how people were executed in China as recently as 1900, suffering excruciating pain. On the pain scale, cane torture sits at 62 points. However, even this horror is far from being the
Bro, even learning about this shit, I'm not gonna lie, like, it's not good, but it's so interesting how people, like, would torture people. Because obviously torture's illegal nowadays. Shout out to that one fucking CIA agent that fucking banned it, I guess. Torture is so interesting, especially older medieval, like, crimes against humanity torture, bro. That is fucking scary.
The worst thing people ever came up with.
You might as, bro, you're saying just stab me at that point. You're being tortured. That's the whole idea. You're being tortured. It's there to make you feel like you're not a fucking human anymore. Like you're being a fucking chicken getting their feathers plucked out one by one. What the fuck is that fart sound effect,
Europeans during the Middle Ages were especially creative in their acts of cruelty. It was then that they invented and actively used a contraption called the Judas cradle. It's a spiky wooden or metal pyramid secured on a support with a special clamp over it. First, the victim's arms and legs were tied, and then their trunk was secured with a metal ring attached to the ceiling or the wall with ropes. After this, the person was slowly seated on the pyramid's sharp point. I won't go into the horrific anatomical details, since it's clear anyway that
that guy got a whole pyramid up his ass. Yo, Mud, what the fuck?
If he wasn't invited,
he literally got a whole fucking Egyptian pyramid up his ass.
process caused unbearable pain. Moreover, such torture could go
Yeah, Bonnie Blue next challenge.
on for days. If the executioners wanted to receive a confession or other information, but the victim remained silent, they tied weights to their arms and legs, causing the pyramid edges to gnaw at the poor person's body even more. As if that wasn't enough, the Judas cradle was never cleaned, so it became the breeding ground for deadly bacteria.
Hey,
So, even if the victims managed to survive, they often died of infections. At any rate, they remained scarred physically and psychologically for the rest of their lives. That's why the Judas cradle received 79 points on the pain scale, crossing the midpoint. However, the first device to go beyond 100 in our list is the oubliette. It's a horizontal tunnel with the only way out in the form of a grated opening.
Bro. Like if you're gonna shove a pyramid up my ass, bro, just give me strokes, bro, please.
Above,
just
used
get out of
as
here.
a dungeon.
Just
Often,
don't do
it was
that.
so narrow that the prisoners couldn't even sit down. Moreover, oubliettes were built right there in the castle so that the victims could hear human voices and smell the food, causing them even more psychological suffering. Yet,
So it's
the
just a
real
small
torture was the
jail
fact that the
cell?
prisoners were literally forgotten about in these holes, and they slowly died of thirst, hunger, exhaustion, and infections. Compared to this, a Judas cradle execution was a swift way to relieve one's suffering. The oubliette is a kind of immurement, which has been practiced since ancient times on all continents. In the Roman Empire, the most influential Vestals who had broken their virginity pledge were sentenced to death.
Imagine you get reborn, right, in the Roman Empire. Like, imagine you just, like, gain consciousness as yourself, right? You have, like, Roman clothes on, you know, you just, like, instantly swap to the Romans, right? You're like a civilian commoner. At that point, would you just end it?
It was against the law to shed their blood, though. So they were immured alive, fated for a slow, desperate death. If you think this insane practice remained in days past, you're wrong. In Mongolia, this barbaric execution method was still in use until at least 1913. So immurement in its different variations receives 108 points
So you're just being left to fucking starve and die of thirst. Okay.
on the pain scale. But what if you're not alone in this closed space? Then it's an entirely different kind of punishment. Rat torture.
Fucking Colosseum.
As far back as in the 1st century AD, the cruelest emperor in the history of the Roman Empire, Nero, used rats to torture those who fell out of favor. They say he put the victim into a barrel with hungry rats who quickly ate the person alive. In India, they made criminals wear wide pants, which were first tied around the ankles and then filled with rodents. Any ideas as to which body parts suffered the most and how painful it was? However, medieval torturers took it even further. They tied the victims down to immobilize them, then
everybody knows about this torture method. Literally everybody knows about this.
placed a bottomless cage on their abdomens and filled it with rats. Then they put hot wood coal on the grates, and the rats became unbearably hot. First, they tried gnawing at the cage in desperate attempts to escape. Later, though, the rats realized they were standing in body and started eating their way out through it. Sometimes the cage was put on the victim's head, near the mouth, or other body parts. I'll let your imagination fill in the details. The most horrible thing is probably the fact that in South American countries, rat torture was in use until the 1980s. It received 112 points on the pain scale. It would seem that there's nothing worse than this. But before we get to the most horrifying tortures that scored the maximum of 140 points,
it's gonna be the brazen bull, right? It has to be the brazen bull.
There are still 2 more devices. The first of which is the rack. This is another deadly invention of the Middle Ages. It looked like a wooden frame with rollers on both ends.
Oh my god, is this, they just fucking tie your limbs up and just fucking pull your limbs off your body?
The person's limbs were tied to them, and when the torturers would start turning the rollers, the victim's arms and legs would stretch in different directions. This caused unbearable pain due to joint displacement, muscle and ligament ruptures, and, in the most horrific cases, even bone fractures. The executioners could torture the victim like this for hours or even days to beat the confession or the necessary information out of them. Sometimes, a specifically trained person would supervise the victim's condition to keep them conscious and alive before a specific time. So, it's unsurprising that just threatening someone to send them to the rack would often be enough to obtain the necessary information. This horrible type of torture received 116 points on the pain scale.
Wait, so their arms don't get fucking ripped off? It's really just dislocating the fuck out of every joint in your fucking limbs? Would people get taller from this? Bro. Go to the rack if you want to play in the NBA. That's literally what you're fucking saying. Bro, get out of here.
However, citizens of ancient Greece managed to outperform even the cruelty of medieval European torturers, being the creators of one of history's most terrifying torture devices, the brazen bull.
Here we go.
According to stories, it was built by an Athenian named Perilos as a commission for a Sicilian tyrant, Phalaris, in the 16th century BC. It was a hollow copper statue of a bull with a hatch on its side. A person would be pushed inside. The hatch
Isn't the worst way to die getting burned alive? Isn't it scientifically proven that the worst way to die is getting burnt alive? In fire?
Would be shut, and then the torturers would start a fire under the bull's belly. Furthermore, the statue's nostril structure made the victim's scream sound like the bull's bellow.
Why did that scare me so fucking bad?
Yet this barbarism was apparently not enough. So after the execution, the victim's bones were used to make jewelry to then be sold on markets. The inventor of this hellish machine realized very quickly that doing business with tyrants was a bad idea, since the first person Phalaris tried out the brazen bull on was Perilos himself. First, the man's skin started burning in the places where it touched the metal. Then, the hot air gradually burned his airways and lungs. He went on to slowly cook alive before choking to death or going unconscious. Before this, though, Perilos went through the agony that reached 130 points on the pain scale. Even this horror, though, won't compare to the fate of those sentenced to lynching. It's definitely one of the most barbaric punishments in humanity's entire history.
What, did they just fucking cut you and treat your wounds? The bull method would get you skinny, by the way. Yo, motherfucker, it's not a fucking sauna, bro!
The moon haunts you!
You're getting cooked, bro!
And it hails from Asia. It was used in China.
It's not a steam room, bro. They put you in a fucking pot roast, in a crock pot.
Vietnam, and
they serving you with fucking cornbread and green beans.
Korea, right until the early 20th century, to punish perpetrators of the most heinous crime like mass murder and high treason, as well as to eradicate the emperor's personal enemies. It comes as no surprise, since the victim would be tied to a pole in a crowded space to turn the execution into public humiliation. Then, a few torturers would slowly cut pieces of flesh out of the convict's arms, legs, and chest. We know from historical records that during Ling Chi, the victim would suffer from 100 to 3,000 wounds. That's why this torture is also dubbed death by 1,000 cuts. Although the experts state that with such wounds, a person would most likely die within 20 minutes. Sometimes the families of the victims would bribe the executioners to inflict a deadly wound right away. This wouldn't remove the victim's physical pain, But it's worth remembering that for the Chinese, Ling Chi was also a spiritual punishment. According to their beliefs, this disfigurement of the body wouldn't allow the victim to be whole and healthy in the afterlife. This horrific execution method officially remained in use in China until 1905. This type of—
Oh my god, that's actually pretty fucking recent. You think that these torture methods are fucking medieval methods. They're not. 1900s? George Washington died in 1799.
torture received the most points on the pain scale, 140. I've told you all this exclusively for educational purposes and to tickle your nerves. But
tickle my nerves. Thanks for tickling my nerves. That was a good video though. I'm not gonna lie. That shit was scary as fuck.
Fear Magneto!